Hey everyone, I'm Shane Ireland. Welcome to another episode of Tasting Notes. Happy New Year, by the way. This is the first Tasting Notes of 2025. And fitting, I have something really special to discuss today. I have maybe never been less confident in my ability to describe a smoking experience than I am right now, and that's because what I'm smoking here is very singular. So I'll get back to that in a second. I'll probably touch on that a number of times. Today I am smoking Cornell Diehl's small batch Firebird Flake, the latest small batch release from Jeremy Reeves and his team over at Cornell Diehl. I'm going to get into a little bit of what makes Firebird so unique. But yeah, right off the bat, I will say that it's been a long time since I've smoked something that totally threw me for a loop, in the best way possible. You do this as long as I have, with as much access to all of the tobaccos that are out there as I have. You start to basically get a pretty good idea of what the experience is going to be like even before you dive into a blend. This is one where I was not prepared for how unique and how interesting the actual experience was going to be. So, still wrapping my head around it. You'll have to forgive me a little bit there, but let's get into it. So, Firebird Flake, as the name would suggest, a really, really beautiful flake produced by Cornell Diehl. In fact, I will say that this is one of the best presses I've seen in the last handful of years from Cornell Diehl. And by that, what I mean is it's just like a gorgeous mix of darker tones, chestnut, a lot of medium browns, even some light specks in there, but perfectly cut, really, really perfectly intact flakes that rub out really nicely. There's a little bit of, I wouldn't say too much moisture, because I think the moisture content right out of the tin is perfect, but there's a sponginess to these flakes when you rub them out. And I think a lot of that has to do with the dark-fired component. But I found that not necessarily drying time, but a little bit of aeration gave me the best results. So let's get into the actual components before I talk about the tin note, which is alluring and incredibly complex. A lot going on in Firebird Flake. So you have three different Virginias forming the base, a 2013 TH13 Red Virginia, a 2021 BFS 21 Red Virginia, and another 2021 grade, which is a slightly different BLF2 21 grade. So three really nice Red Virginia grades form the base. To that, two different heirloom Orientals and two different varieties of Dark-Fired Kentucky from the U.S. are added. The heirloom Orientals, both from 2005. We have a 2005 Izmir and a 2005 Samson. And again, incredibly rare Orientals, super high quality, and aged that long. The complexity is just through the roof, off the charts, whatever you want to say. The dark-fired components are interesting. There is a 2015, I'll say regular Dark-Fired Kentucky, like one of the more normal grades. This has undergone a more extensive fire curing process. To that, we have also added, or I should say Jeremy has also added, a 2019 semi-fire cured Kentucky. The semi-fire cured is a different grade of Dark-Fired Kentucky that is fire cured to a slightly lesser degree. So you maintain a little bit more sugar, sweetness, a little bit more of the sort of, I would say, earthier and more burley-like notes of the tobacco. Basically what Jeremy has achieved here is balancing two very contrasting tobacco types, and by that I mean Oriental and Dark-Fired Kentucky. Stark differences between those tobacco varietals, and typically used independently of one another. I'm sure this exists, particularly in the English realm, where you have Orientals, Latakia, and maybe also a little bit of Dark-Fired. But I cannot think of very many blends that are Oriental, Virginia, and Dark-Fired in combination, if anything. Very, very unique components, high-quality components, lots of different grades here, and the complexity and the balance that Jeremy has been able to achieve combining all of those components is remarkable. So, let me get into the tin note real quick. Jeremy did mention to me that in order to achieve a balance between these very, very different types of tobaccos, the actual ratios are quite stark as well. So basically, a pretty hefty component of those 2005 heirloom Orientals, the Izmir and the Samsun, a pretty hefty component there, and a contrastingly very small amount of the 2 grades of dark-fired is how you're able to achieve a balance between these very different varietals. So I'm mentioning that because it's remarkable how much the dark-fired comes through in the tin anyway, even though it is by far the most condimental of the components used in this blend. The difference is I can pick up the sort of campfire and woody and like mesquite-like sort of quality, but overall there's more sweetness. It's like a malty sweetness, which I think I'm attributing to the Red Virginias there, and a little bit of a caramelized sort of like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to explain it, but there's like some baking spices and maybe like some baked goods kind of a sweetness there, but also a nice lovely earthy tone. It has a little bit of that sort of cured meat kind of vibe going. It's really just not like anything else I can think of. Super alluring, super fragrant, nearly incense-like, as an English mixture might be. Just everything more balanced and a little more refined than you typically associate with these big, powerful fire-cured tobaccos. I mentioned that I advise giving Firebird a little bit more aeration, like not so much drying time, but just fluff it up really good. If you do choose to rub these flakes out, which I have in the bowls that I've smoked, I find that it takes to the flame very, very easily, performs very well. Like I said, moisture content right out of the tin is perfect. The flavor right away is, considering that this, yes, the heirloom Orientals are from 2005. The fully dark-fired Kentucky is from 2015. You have a lot of Virginias that are 2019, 2021. Like, we have some age on the components themselves, but this blend was produced relatively recently, fresh out of the tin. It is simultaneously powerful and robust, but with none of the harsh edges that come with that in a fresh tobacco. There's definitely a mature quality to this, a well-rounded quality to it. But it does stand up well to, I don't know, I mean, smoking later in the evening after a hearty dinner, smoking outside. I think if you prefer really full-flavored Virginia Periques, or if you prefer English mixtures and really powerful, robust tobaccos, this is going to speak to you for sure, but it's going to be more of an all-day smoke. I also think that straight Virginia smokers are going to come at this and say, oh, that's a little more complex than I'm used to, maybe a little more robust than I'm used to, but it's still very approachable. It's going to be difficult for me to use the sort of typical like flavor notes to describe this blend. It's more about the experience, I think. I am picking up some of the dark-fired. Like I said, it's very elegant. I really enjoy that partially fire-cured, like the grade that is fire-cured to a lesser degree, because it's so complex. It adds a little bit of sweetness, and you get a lot of that nice earthy tone that you would get just from a straight burley tobacco. Maybe even a little bit of like a candied nuts, you know, a little nuttiness, but sweetness also. And I think it's interesting that the sort of earthy tones, the nuttiness, and then some of the more incense-like notes that come from the Orientals play really nicely with the dark-fired notes. So you have something that's a little sharper, a little woodier, a little smokier, playing off of these more floral and incense-like notes with a nice earthy foundation, and still plenty of the sort of like malty sweetness from the Red Virginias. The way that Firebird Flake evolves throughout the bowl, and the way that it performs in a variety of different chamber sizes and sizes of pipe overall, there's so much complexity and so much variety in terms of the experience that I have not really been able to just pin down exactly what this one is. I think that's part of the appeal, really. Like I said, it's refined and balanced and well-rounded, but it has an alluring quality that, based on the descriptors that I'm using, might make it sound like a lot of different blends that already exist, but it really is a singular experience. I go back and forth from feeling like I'm tasting maybe Mexican hot chocolate to maybe like fruit leather, like even some stuff that I would normally associate with like higher amounts of Perique, like these sort of dark fruity notes. The woodiness and the spice is there on the retrohale, but it's so delicate that you don't get any of that sort of tingle or pepper. Yeah, I do get a little bit of that marzipan. I do get some of the sourdough notes that I typically associate with good red Virginias. There are a lot of tobaccos that we have collectively referred to as being balanced over the years, but the contrast here between the two main focuses, which is the heirloom Orientals and the Dark-Fired, it's a balance that I wouldn't have guessed was achievable. Yeah, I mean, warming spices, clove, maybe a little bit of allspice. This is like an all-star team of all of my favorite tobacco notes. I would have to sit here in front of this camera for a lot longer to be able to accurately describe the experience of smoking Firebird Flake. But yes, I think that complexity, balance, a singular flavor profile, and like I said, really for me personally, somebody who favors Virginias, Virginia Periques, Burleys, stuff with Dark-Fired in it, and Oriental blends too. It has a little bit of everything. I think that this is something that seasoned pipe smokers are going to go absolutely crazy for. I think it's definitely approachable if you're coming from aromatics or straight Virginias, or even from lighter all-day Englishes. Firebird Flake is another Jeremy Reeves innovation, and it differs from others like Anthology and Steamworks to my mind because those sort of reinvent and improve a format that we're all very familiar with already. Virginias, Virginia Periques, Stove Virginias, etc. Firebird Flake is the first blend in a long time that I can say that my preconceived idea of what it could be based on the components and the actual experience are just totally different. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It is nice to be challenged every once in a while by a blend in terms of like what it has to offer and the complexity of it. I intend to get my hands on as much as I possibly can and see how it ages, which I think is going to be remarkable too. There's enough flavor here and enough sweetness from the base Virginias that this one will definitely have long legs. No idea what it's going to be like in the future. Most of the time, like I said, if you've smoked different types of Stove Virginias and Perique and Virginia Periques and all that kind of stuff, even English mixtures, you kind of have an idea if you've been doing this long enough to have cellared some for a period of time. I have no idea what Firebird Flake is going to be like, but I know that it has enough flavor and enough complexity that it's going to stand up and have long legs for sure. Yeah, I think that starting off 2025 extremely strong, Jeremy, yeah, I did not have it on my bingo card this year that Heirloom Orientals and Dark-Fired Kentucky were going to be the magic combo of the year. So, thanks everybody. See you next time.